As Amazon began to grow, Jeff Bezos noticed a dangerous, invisible enemy creeping into his meetings: the fear of making a mistake. You see, it wasn't some sudden crisis, but this slow, creeping paralysis. That explosive, anything-is-possible energy of a startup, it was being replaced by the cautious, slow deliberation of a big company. And Bezos knew, deep down, that this was a path to total irrelevance. So today, we're going to unpack the decision-making framework that literally turned Amazon into a juggernaut of innovation and speed. This one idea from Bezos became a declaration of war against the one threat that can kill any company, big or small: hesitation. See, he realized that in the crazy fast world of technology, the biggest risk wasn't being wrong, it was being slow. So he developed a radical system to force action. All right, so here's our roadmap for really getting inside the high-velocity mindset of Jeff Bezos. We're going to start with the crisis that sparked his whole philosophy, then dig into its personal origins, break down the rule itself, and see how he actually built it into Amazon's DNA. After that, we'll look at the incredible legacy it created, and finally, figure out how you can apply it yourself. To really get the solution, you first have to understand the problem. So let's go back. It's the early 2000s, and Amazon is facing this internal crisis. It's not about sales, it's about speed. Bezos saw this dangerous mindset setting in all across the company, a kind of cultural sickness he gave a really simple and kind of ominous name: Day 2. Bezos was crystal clear about who the enemy was. Day 1, that's the startup mindset. You're hungry, you're agile, you're inventive. But Day 2? Well, that's stasis. It's when a company stops inventing and just starts optimizing, when the process becomes way more important than the actual outcome. As he famously wrote to his shareholders, Day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. I mean, for him, this was an existential threat. And the symptoms of Day 2? They were everywhere. His leaders were just endlessly analyzing everything, demanding more and more data before they'd ever commit to a decision. They were waiting for 90%, sometimes even 95% certainty. Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty responsible, right? Diligent. But Bezos saw it for exactly what it was: a form of institutional procrastination. The whole company was getting stuck, and this extreme caution was becoming way more costly than any potential mistake. So you have to ask, where did this obsession with speed and action even come from? This wasn't just some business tactic he read in a book. No, it started with a single, life-altering personal decision he made years before Amazon was even a whisper of an idea. So before Amazon, Bezos was this rising star at a super successful hedge fund. He had a secure, incredibly high-paying job, a safe bet. But then he saw this one statistic, that the internet was growing at 2,300% per year. And he faced this classic dilemma: stick with a predictable, safe path, or just leap headfirst into the chaotic, uncertain, but potentially revolutionary future of the internet. And to make this huge choice, he came up with this mental model. He imagined himself at 80 years old, looking back on his life. And he asked himself, okay, at 80, am I going to regret leaving Wall Street at the peak of my career? And he figured, probably not. But then he asked the big one: will I regret not participating in this thing called the internet, which I believe is going to be a revolution? And he knew, with just absolute certainty, that he would regret that for the rest of his life. And this personal insight, it became the philosophical foundation for Amazon's entire corporate culture. He learned in this really deep, personal way that the pain of trying something and failing is temporary. But the pain of not trying at all, that pain of inaction, that's a permanent regret. He realized that hesitation is often the most expensive mistake you can possibly make. This personal philosophy led directly to the central rule we're exploring today. It became his strategic weapon to fight Day 2 thinking and to encode a bias for action right into Amazon's operating system. This number. This is the core of his whole philosophy, the optimal point for making a decision. Not 90% and definitely not 100%, but 70%. It's a number that feels slightly uncomfortable, doesn't it? And that is the entire point. It's a mechanism specifically designed to force you to act before you feel fully ready. So here's the formal definition. Bezos argued that most decisions should be made with about 70% of the information you wish you had. If you wait for 90%, you're almost certainly moving too slow. The market's already moved on, your competitor has launched, the opportunity is just gone. But this doesn't mean you should be reckless. The real key is knowing when and how to apply this rule. And to apply the rule, Bezos made this brilliant distinction. He saw that companies get bogged down because they treat every single decision like it's a one-way door, this monumental, you can't go back choice. But he argued that's rarely true. Most decisions are actually two-way doors. You can walk through, see if you like what's on the other side, and if not, you can just turn around and walk right back out with minimal damage. And those are the decisions that have to be made with speed. For those type 2, two-way door decisions, the biggest risk isn't being wrong, it's being slow. Speed creates this rapid feedback loop. By acting when you're 70% confident, you get real-world data almost immediately. You learn, you adjust your course. A small, correctable error made quickly is infinitely more valuable than a perfect decision made too late. Delay is the real enemy here. Now, a philosophy is pretty useless without a system to enforce it, right? Especially in a company with hundreds of thousands of employees. So Bezos built Amazon's entire operating system around the 70% rule, using two really famous mechanisms designed to guarantee that decision velocity. First, he attacked organizational friction with the famous two-pizza team rule. The logic is so simple. If a team is too big to be fed by two large pizzas, it's just too big. And this isn't just some quirky rule, it's a structural mandate for speed. Smaller teams cut down on communication overhead. They can debate, get aligned, and reach a 70% consensus much faster than some huge committee, which empowers them to act with real autonomy. Second, he attacked shallow thinking. Bezos famously banned PowerPoint. And why? Because bullet points are lazy. They don't force you into deep, structured thought. Instead, he instituted the Six-Page Narrative Memo. Before any big meeting, the leader has to write this detailed prose-style document outlining the problem, the solutions, the data. And then, meetings start with 20 to 30 minutes of silent reading. This forces everyone to get to a high-quality, 70% level of understanding before a single word of debate is even spoken. It makes the discussion that follows incredibly efficient. So what happens when you have this disciplined system of high-velocity, high-quality decision-making? Well, you get a legacy of relentless innovation that has completely transformed global commerce and created one of the most valuable companies in the history of the world. I mean, just look at this timeline. Amazon Prime was a huge two-way door bet. If it didn't work, they could have just changed the terms or shut it down. AWS was this radical idea born from their own internal tech, a bet that other companies would want to rent their computing power. And the Kindle was a bet against their own physical book business. All of these were born from a culture that empowers leaders to take big, calculated risks at high speed. And this philosophy also meant that you had to embrace failure, sometimes on a massive scale. Setbacks like the disastrous Fire phone, they weren't seen as career-ending disasters. In fact, Bezos saw them as a necessary and even celebrated cost of invention. His thinking was, if your experiments aren't failing some of the time, it just means you're not swinging for the fences. You're not being ambitious enough. His enduring legacy is really this day one mindset. He proved that decision velocity is the single greatest competitive advantage in the digital age. It's not just about being first, it's about being able to learn and adapt faster than absolutely everyone else. He codified this belief that even a trillion-dollar corporation has to fight every single day to maintain the hunger and agility of a tiny startup. Okay, so what's the takeaway for us? This isn't just a lesson for Fortune 500 CEOs. It's a powerful mental model that we can all apply in our own lives and careers starting right now. The very first step is to ask yourself this critical question. Seriously, where are you stuck? What project, what decision, what tough conversation are you putting off because you're waiting for that perfect moment or for just a little more information? You have to be honest and identify where the pursuit of perfection is really just procrastination in a fancy disguise. So here's your action plan. First, identify. Is the decision in front of you a type 1, one-way door, or is it a type 2, reversible door? Second, gather. Get enough high-quality info to feel roughly 70% confident. Don't wait for 90%. Third, act. Just make the call, knowing that for any two-way door, you can always adjust your course later. And finally, fight that internal battle. You have to resist the comfort of procrastination when it's disguised as careful deliberation. And this is the ultimate lesson. At his core, Jeff Bezos was a meticulous, long-term thinker whose greatest fear was stagnation. The 70% rule was his weapon against it, a calculated system to prove that moving fast and learning is so much more powerful than moving slow just to be right. So distinguish between the one-way and two-way doors in your own life. Fight that urge to wait for perfect information. Because as his relentless bias for action teaches us, the future doesn't belong to the cautious, it belongs to the quick.